Hey,
And we're
what's going
live.
on? This is MC and Mad Talk to Civil War number 25. Yeah, my voice is still a little under the weather. I did 2 shows yesterday. So it is what it is, but we're gonna keep it going. This week we are talking about the riots in both New York and Richmond as well as Detroit, right, MC?
Yes, yes. So there were a number of riots that happened during the Civil War. All right. Now there were two well-known riots that happened immediately during secession. Right. And these were because you had people that were pro-secession and people that were pro-union. All right. Co-located together. All right. And there was the two biggest ones that of note happened in Baltimore and in St. Louis. Now, both of these were, for all intents and purposes, suppressed. All right. In the Baltimore riots, basically they chased some Union troops initially. During the call up, however, more Union troops arrive and they basically stomp on what was left of the secessionists that were trying to form. And there was a number of civilians that were killed. This is one thing that people don't understand. They weren't just happy-go-lucky. When they're talking riots, we're not talking, burn a car here and there like you're seeing going on in France. You're talking about people trying to hurt one another and harm one another and burn each other out. Okay. So
well, yeah, when it comes to like Baltimore, that was a riot because the mayor of the city himself was a secessionist. He was a Confederate sympathizer. Matter of fact, doesn't Lincoln arrest him shortly after?
A lot of people are arrested. The Annapolis, of course, is under total control because of obviously the co-location of the academies. The Naval Academy in Annapolis. So Maryland decides that, okay, we need to have a session to talk about, or a Congress to talk about secession. They move it to Frederick, Maryland. They have a vote. The vote is widely, it's 13-4 or 54 against secession. But at the same time, they were trying to hold a neutral stance, so they wanted to try and remove the Union troops. This never, of course, happens. All right. I mean, you're not going to be able to sit and create a neutral stance. And
let's be honest. Abraham Lincoln posts cannon brigades on the heights above Baltimore, right?
Of course.
Well, you say of course, like that's an everyday thing.
No, it was something that was going to happen. You could not. There's no way that Washington D.C. could exist being surrounded by secessionists. All right, so there was no way. All right, if you were going to keep D.C. still there was no way. All right, that you could allow Maryland to secede. Period. All right. Then you also have the aspect. All right, in St. Louis where they were actually, both sides were literally raising regiments, all right, in the same city. Now, we don't know why, but both sides started shooting at one another. This not much of a surprise.
I mean, yeah, is that a surprise? I mean, you have a Confederate sympathetic side raising troops to fight for the Confederacy, and then you have the Union boys. Like, they're not going to shoot at each other, MC. I mean, come on.
So basically, you have a riot going on. The Union basically, once again, comes out, and I'm not sure what that was. Union goes ahead and has a conflict. They take it, they seize it, and they're able to control it. I mean, so you early on, this was what most of the quote unquote civilian rioting was.
Well, and I don't know why you guys muted MC, but the thing is though, as well, especially in Baltimore, Abraham Lincoln had to control that city. There's no way you could let Maryland itself secede. You can't.
No, of course, because Yeah, DC will be surrounded.
There's no way.
DC would have been surrounded. All right. So, and as a matter of fact, initially there was a fear that Delaware, because it was a slave state, may join, and so they initially put troops in Delaware as well. Now, the number of slaves in Delaware was under a total number of under 1,000 slaves total.
Yeah, exactly. MC, I've never heard of Delaware even thinking about secession. Like, that never really entered their public conscience. They were pretty much Union from the get-go.
I wouldn't say that necessarily. The one thing to remember about the Civil War, right, is, well, yeah, there were abolitionists in the South, and there were Southern sympathizers in the North. All right. And this was regardless of the states. Now, granted, in certain states, you had obviously higher percentages of both in a mixture. But for example, in Illinois, you have a number of Southern sympathies going on. All right. Especially along the border, where they absolutely, you had, riots and stuff that actually took place in Charleston, in Illinois. All right. But that was more of a Copperhead thing than anything else.
Well, yeah, and we're going to get to the Copperheads when we talk about New York, because that's where the Copperheads really come into it. But as well, San Francisco, that it was split down the middle, right? They ended up having riots and infighting.
Well, wherever there was a port, all right, wherever you had people competing for jobs that the job was strictly lift and carry, you were going to have riots. All right, you were going to see the potential for riots. Well, and the reason is very simple. Okay, if your job is to empty a ship, is to pick up cargo and move it from point A to point B, your whole job relies not upon your intelligence in any way, shape, or form. You don't need any kind of skilled training to do this. You're just told, pick this up, move it over there. Pick this up, move it. Anybody can do that. Okay? So that being the case, you're competing with every other human being who physically can lift something and move it from point A to point B. It's total non-skilled labor. That's what you're dealing with. So in these areas where you have ships, where a lot of people are employed, all right, to load and empty ships, you're going to have a lot of unskilled labor and a lot of competition there. And why am I bringing this up? I'm bringing this up because the draft riots were the result of that attitude, because they knew, all right, I mean, you're a white guy, you're working on the docks, you're for what we call longshoremen nowadays.
Well, let's be honest too. This was the Irish population of New York that ended up rioting. Like, let's be perfectly frank about it.
Well, it's the Irish that begin it, but you also got to remember you have the same thing happening in Detroit in March, all right, which is a few months before the New York riots. You have a situation where basically people are saying, okay, I've got to lose my job because I'm being forced into the military, and who am I going to lose it to? The people who don't have to get drafted. And initially, the people who were drafted had to be white. No blacks were initially going to be allowed in the Union service as groups. Okay, they weren't going to. There were Union soldiers who were black. Okay, there were Union soldiers who were Native Americans as well. They themselves, though, were on ones and twos types of things. They weren't brought in as a group. They had to get special dispensation, more or less, in order to be allowed to be in the military.
Well, and I find that odd for the Native American population, because there's a lot of Native groups still in the Northern Territories, and the South used the Natives. We had entire brigades that were Cherokee, for example.
Well,
the Indian Territory was one of the last ones to surrender. I mean, The
That's
South
true,
had,
but it had more to do with they spent more time fighting amongst themselves than they did actually actions against the Union. Right?
that's fair, but they were still Confederates.
They did have the Confederate uniform. That's true, and they were fighting against the U.S. government. That's true as well.
Well, nobody talks about the riots in Detroit. I've hardly heard about it. Go ahead and go more in depth in that, and I'll shut up for a minute.
Well, the basically it started. Unfortunately, it basically started with a guy who gets accused of raping a white woman, right? And this gentleman is accused. He is, for lack of a better term, mixed race. All right. He claims that he's a Native American, but there's really no evidence that he was truly Native American. All right. His name is what was his name? Let me look up his name here. William Faulkner.
I think I know his name. His name was Tonka.
No, his name was William Faulkner, right? And he's tried in court by where they take the woman's testimony. She later recants, okay? But because of this, they use this as an example of to go after quote unquote freed blacks, which have been increasing as a result of the Emancipation Proclamation. All right, and they are now, competing for work. Well, now the whites have to go, they have to be drafted. Okay. They have to go into the draft, and what are they being drafted for? Well, they're being drafted to save the blacks who are now taking their jobs. And of course you have racism that's going on there. And of course the newspapers, all right, basically inflame the situation to the point where a riot begins. Okay, and it comes to the point where, okay, they got to call out the militia. They got to put an end to it. Later on, the girl recants, and this guy he was going to be executed. He doesn't get executed. But he does go on trial. He does get convicted. All right. Later on, when she recants and says no, that he didn't actually rape her, they let him go, and so forth. But I mean, he gets, when she recants, he is then pardoned. All right. But a lot of stuff gets destroyed. The crowd started, roaming through the streets. They start breaking things. They start burning things. Right. Until basically the military comes out and says, okay, that's enough of this. Go home, or we open fire. And of course, in this case, some people had to be shot before they would go home. I think 4 people, 4 or 5 people died. All right, at this point. But this is a harbinger of what's coming. Go on.
Well, no, and was there any idea if there was Confederate spies fanning the flames?
I didn't see any kind of evidence of that. I haven't seen any evidence where people were saying they were fanning the flames of the draft riots here. There were obviously sympathies about what was going on, because the cost of these wars was just the toll on human life was far beyond. I mean, this is happening in 1863. So the real import about how bad and how horrible these battles are have come home to roost. Okay. Another thing that is starting to inflame people's is people are seeing pictures of the battlefields. People are seeing pictures, all right, of the dead littered all over. And this is having an effect because it's becoming
you had your first war course and stuff going on.
Well, but you also have a visual medium. All right. People are, it's one thing to read about something in a paper, right? and you're reading the words, and you can analyze the words, and you can think about the words as you're reading them, right? It's something else when you're viscerally seeing pictures of a dead body, of maimed men, right? Of, horses, the dozens of horses littering.
Well, and you have the men coming home.
What was that?
Right, you had the men coming home from battle also.
Oh,
you
yeah.
had the men coming home from battle, maimed and injured, shell-shocked. I mean,
not so much shell-shocked per se, but I mean, they're missing limbs, all right? And back then, if you're missing a limb, you got to remember, I mean, it was a very much a world where you had to do a lot of physical things to keep yourself alive. All right. Walking is very difficult to do when you've only got one leg. All right. And you've got to walk everywhere. There is no car to drive you from point A to point B. Getting onto a horse. Can you imagine what it was like to try and get onto a horse with only one leg? All right. To get behind a plow. All right. And plow a field with just a single leg. All right. I mean, these are devastating effects on the person's livelihood. All right. You could no longer perform the way you used to be able to perform. Even losing an arm, even if it was your offhand, right? You've now, not only do you have to dress yourself with one arm, yeah, you can learn to do that. But at the same time, you've also got to do everything that you used to do with two hands. Can you bale hay now? All right. Think about the simplest farm things that you have to do on a farm, which the majority of the country was still farmers. All right. Yes, the Industrial Revolution is taking place, but still the vast majority of people are on the family farms. They're not clerks, and they're not metal workers. And even in metalworking and things like that in the industrial areas, having two hands, all right, is something that's critical, just to live. So these are, devastating, actions that have taken place. These are very difficult for people to just overcome as they want. And this is all a part of this. And then, of course, what has happened is just like the South. Now, the South in 1862 has already started to institute a draft. The Congress of the United States authorizes a draft. And now there's ways to get out of the draft. You could buy your way out of the draft. If you have enough money, you can purchase your way out. Or
yeah.
What a lot of people
in the
do.
North. Real quick, MC, in the North, it was $300 or you pay somebody to take your place. In the South, you had to own 20 slaves and pay like $50. It was a big difference, but the owning 20 slave part, I don't get. Was that because they feared,
well, I think
is that because they were afraid that the women would be left behind? And
no, it was an acknowledgement that you needed to have enough people around to prevent the slave rebellions. They were during the entire Civil War. There was a constant fear of the South of a massive slave rebellion, that the slaves would rise up in mass and kill their white masters and then go roaming around.
Well, that's what happened in Haiti. That's why.
You kind of broke up there a little bit, but there had been previous slave riots before, so they were definitely afraid of it. All right, now, but you can see where all this is building. All right, both sides had their problems, and I'm going to go ahead and let me share this. Some of this stuff here. Just give me a second here. All right, can you see this?
Yep.
All right, this is where basically some of the buildings start happening in New York. Now, the New York riots, all right, are a draft riot, but they quickly turn into a race riot. And like I said, the reason they're turning into race riots is because whites had to be drafted, blacks didn't have to be drafted, and in the areas where you were dealing with non-skilled labor, where blacks were going to directly compete with whites, people were upset about this. They were saying, "Look, I'm going to be losing my job to protect the black man, to go out there and fight and risk my life for a black man while he takes my job." Okay, and these racial tensions were frickin' fanned, especially in New York. Now, in New York, you had the additional aspect of the Copperheads, all right, which Mad Dodge mentioned earlier. The Copperheads further inflamed this because they're of course upset that the Emancipation Proclamation has taken place at all. And so they're basically furthering that the blacks are going to take your jobs and you're going to lose your job to the black man. And why should you do this? Why go ahead and fight? And New York, for the longest time, had always had a lot of Southern sympathizers in it, mainly because it was a mercantile area. And so you had a lot of free flow of trade and traffic and so forth. So the riots begin. They quickly turn into race riots where they basically start running around chasing after black people and basically killing them. All right.
Yeah. Am I back? Can you hear me now?
Yep.
All right. No. I want to talk about that a little bit because literally 3/4 of the black population moves out of New York after this. You know, the ones that weren't killed. You lose a lot of citizens from New York. They pick up and leave.
There were a lot of people. There were some lynchings that took place. Overall, the number of deaths are far less than what people imagine there to be. But the riots got to the point where they called out the military, and the military at this point that they got a hold of were the troops that were coming back, all right, from the Battle of Gettysburg. And they were having none of it. All right. When they went in there, they went in and these, as you can see in this picture here, you can see that there were areas where they were trying to set up zones of control, right? That whole movie Gangs of New York, they were going to try and take over all of New York City, and the troops had none of it. And they would just walk in there, and they did open fire and tore these things down. Now, once the military arrived and firing began, people fled. Okay, there wasn't a lot of people standing around trying to say, you know what, we can stand against these troops. And in fact, this statement here where they're showing the cannon fire, a bit overstated. Okay.
Yeah,
but they did bring in cannon to control certain areas and certain avenues, and they basically suppressed the riot with military troops.
Well, no, and as my internet was messing up, I don't know if you talked about it, but the fact is, though, the riot in New York started from the Irish. And the reason why was what you were talking about. You could pay your way out of the draft. If you could pay your way, though, $300 add inflation for 2019, that's like what, $3,000? Who has $3,000?
Oh, it's probably close to $30,000.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. In today's money, it's probably close to $300 was. Holy crap! I mean, you could buy a house for like 25, right? I mean, it was you could live real well, on $300 for quite a while, right? Now, obviously, the number of things that are happening, debt borrowing and so forth is happening. A number of things are happening, but the fact of losing your job, all right, has an effect on people. And so it does turn into, it is the Irish. The Irish are basically, okay, I'm not a U.S. citizen, so I don't have to get drafted, but now I have to compete directly with blacks. And there's a massive, this can't be understated. There are massive influxes of blacks into the North because of the Emancipation Proclamation. It did increase a tremendous number of runaways. And the policy of the North, which initially was was okay. If you caught a runaway slave, you could return it to your master. Basically, for the most part, the Union ignored it, and later on, the Union takes an entire different policy, which is no, we're not returning released slaves. All right. Well, where are they going to go? You know, it's great that you ran away from the farm. It's great that you ran away from the plantation. You still got to eat. You know, you still got to do something to survive. So where are you going to go? Where are you going to there's no land for you unless you go way out west and start homesteading for yourself. There wasn't any big, massive movement at this point. There's a problem, of course, if you attempt to go and homestead at this point, because the homesteads are wide open. The Kansas, Nebraska territories are so wide open, there's rampant, butchery going on. And what I mean by that is you have bandits, you've got all sorts of things roaming around. Unless you were close to a city, if you were just on a farm, you were risking your life. And if you were going to be a black person by yourself out in the middle of the wilderness, you were going to be targeted. You might even be, the worst part about it is you might even be targeted by your quote unquote neighbors who are technically unionists. Right? So that wasn't an option. You know, you weren't going to go about there. So what were you going to do?
Well, no, and once again, the natives mainly sided with the Confederacy. So what are you going to do? You're going to go homestead in the West where you have a bunch of fucking Confederate Indians running around? Not a good idea.
Well, you have that all across. So, of course, the blacks were going into the cities and they were competing for the non-skilled labor. Now, there's a lot of, pretty much almost all labor at this point is more or less non-skilled. Factories are just starting to come into being. You do have steel, plants starting to develop, and there are people that of all races that did start to work in the steel plants and so forth. But
I want to talk a little bit more about the Irish, though. Jensen, this is a spot where you can jump in. The Irish were treated like shit in the UK, right? They really were. They were treated almost like slaves, right? Like, it was still legal to kill an Irishman in England, right? I mean, it was pretty bad.
Yeah, so that's why they all went over to America, and things didn't exactly get much better for them there, did it?
Well, it got a little bit better, but then what I wanted to do is lead into this. They thought of themselves as finally being white. I'm sorry, that's the way it is. In England, they weren't treated equal. They were finally felt like they were equal and they were better than the freed slaves coming north. And it really like kind of like the Mexican influence now where people are like they're stealing our jobs. It was that sentiment. You know what I mean? And now the Irish finally felt superior to somebody. It's just the way it is.
Well, the Irish have always thought of themselves as superior. Just ask Voice of One.
Actually, just as a minor point, over in Britain nowadays, when it comes to filling out forms of nationality and things like that, you have white, and in a separate section, you have Irish. That still exists now.
No shit. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Hey Jensen, what's going on in the chat? What are they doing? Because I told you I can't watch it right now.
Yeah. To be honest, we've got Terra Marine saying about he's just watched a book review about the French Foreign Legion and how they were used to play both sides in World War II, like disposable mercenaries. And actually, that's pretty much it. It's just minor interaction.
That is interesting because the French Foreign Legion. I mean, that would be an interesting discussion to have, but it's not part of the Civil War at the moment. But that is an interesting discussion because the Vichy France did create a number of things that happened and the Foreign Legion was caught in the middle of it. So, well, that is interesting. But
yeah,
the other
MC. Let's talk about the Copperheads in New York. All right, let's talk about the Southern sympathizers. How much part did they play in the draft riots?
Well, okay, it's hard to gauge public reaction. Although you can say that they added to the flames to the fire. They were the ones who were trying to push, a disruption in New York. Now, New York is the major trading port in the North. All right, always has been. So any kind of disruption that from their point of view of what was going on in New York is going to have positive benefits for the South. All right. So they were doing whatever they could to rile up the populace to keep the riots going. Now, so they were you could say that they were adding fuel to the fire to an area that was already a tinderbox. Okay. What the effects and what their, how successful they were, there was a riot. It did take place. It did take Union soldiers to suppress it. But overall, in a long-term effect, it was fairly minor. All right. From what was going on and the battles that were going on, it did delay. All right. And this is very true. It did delay Meade, all right, from following up, all right, back and placing the Army of the Potomac back across the Rappahannock. Okay, so from that standpoint, it gave the South breathing room. All right, the fact that you had to move in a significant number of Union troops, even temporarily, all right, did slow down Meade's chasing of Lee. Right.
That's the thing, though. All right, so if the Confederates would have planned this, if this was a operation out of Canada with the Confederate Secret Service, then Lee would have followed up with an attack because you have troops being moved north. Now you have an opening. You know what I mean?
Well, but not after Gettysburg, you couldn't.
Which is what I'm saying. They would have timed this a lot better. I don't think it was a Confederate thing. I think this was homegrown in New York.
Oh, no, very much so. I mean, you taking advantage of a situation that exists is, one thing. To say that they didn't take advantage of it. Of course, they took advantage of it, all right. But the situation was already existing. It was already a tinderbox. It was already something that was getting ready to explode. They just added fuel to the fire. How much of an effect on it was? It's impossible to say. That they weren't instrumental in causing it, however, but how did they make it worse? How much worse did they make it? Hard to say, right? The fact is that it was a tinderbox ready to explode, and could be exploited to an extent. But as far as an operation, all right, from the Confederate operation, like a Confederacy operation, no. I mean, were there elements that were, like I said, feeding the flames? Yeah, but how effective was it? To be honest, I would say that any effect that they had was minimal.
Well, no, you know what makes me kind of sad from a historical context? We'll never know how many Confederate spies there were. We'll never know. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we do. We know how many there were. Not enough.
Good answer.
Yeah, you're a dick.
Well, am I wrong?
No. All right. Well, okay. So New York's mayor is pro-Confederate. The governor of New York itself wanted to secede and join the Confederacy. So Abraham Lincoln is sitting here at his desk, right? And he's seeing New York on fire. He's getting fucking transmissions in over the telegraph. What's he thinking? Has New York left? You know what I mean?
I don't think so. Because the governor, while the governor initially was was for secession, there was no very chance that New York was going to secede. There really wasn't. The city of New York, yeah, it's a population center, but overall, the Union had no problem raising troops from New York. All right, the Zawars, for example, of New York were well known in the Union Army. The Irish Brigade of the Union came from the New York area for the most part. So
yeah, but that's not fair. They walked off the boat and got handed a little piece of paper and said, "Hey, join the Union Army and we'll feed you." These motherfuckers were starving.
They also fed them lead, but I mean the lead was fed by mainly the Confederates. But I mean, they were fed, right?
Wow, I don't
the
know.
Union
What do you
Army
think?
didn't have any starvation rations or anything. For the most part, the only place where the Union ever suffered any kind of deprivation at all was in Chattanooga. All right, and that was only for a couple of months. Other than that, the Union troops were pretty much well fed throughout the war.
Well, now you're talking about food. Let's pivot. Richmond, Virginia. Set the stage for us.
Richmond, all right, during the winter of 62, 63, it is an absolute horrible winter. There were a number of times that snowfall reached over a foot dropped on Richmond. Okay. And when all that snow melted, it turned the roads and everything around that area into basically mud. You basically had mud. You were stepping in mud. You up to your calves, if not your knees. All right. So what was the effect? The effect was that for a large period of time in March and April, foodstuffs, all right, couldn't reach Richmond. All right, the rail systems were not able to transport enough goods and enough food to supply the city, and as a result, people began to starve. Now, this is on top of the fact that the South is already coming apart at the seams. The biggest challenge that Jefferson Davis had, all right, throughout the war was he needed centralized power in order to coordinate a military. But the whole purpose of secession was to prevent centralization of power.
Yes, there was quite a few states that got mad, actually, that were Confederate states. That is very true. But I mean, what are you supposed to do when you're fighting a defensive war? You know what I mean?
Davis, if you have to fight a war, you got to fight a war. You still got a war to fight. Okay, I mean that's really what it comes down to: is are you going to have a country or not?
Yeah, and that was Davis's argument, and I agree with Davis. He had to conscript, do conscription, the draft. He had to do it. I mean, you can't fight a war with no men, and the Union had so many resources that the South didn't have. It's ridiculous.
And so, well, I mean, you can call it ridiculous if you want, then you shouldn't have started a ridiculous war. But we'll go on. All right. So what you end up having is people are the people are starting to starve, and of course, the poorer people are starving the most. They decide to redress, the women of Richmond decide to redress the governor of Virginia and say, hey, look, we are hungry. Now, we don't know whether or not initially they got to meet with the governor. There's a lot of people who believe that he refused to see them. All right. At which point they meet again the next day and just start taking food. They start raiding the bakery shops. They start raiding the grocery stores. And of course, once they start breaking in, and these are women who, when they started marching, more and more women were coming out, and more people were coming out, joining the fray. And they started breaking into the stores. They start, they're hungry. They're starving to death. They're taking everything out of these stores, all the flour, all the beef, everything that was going on. And you've also got to remember, it's at this time is you have the South is having a lot of difficulty moving troops back and forth, all right, along this. And it's at this time they have lost control, okay, of Chattanooga. People really underestimate how devastating the loss of Chattanooga was to the South in its ability to move goods up and down, all right, because of how much of an important rail hub Chattanooga was. So all of this has happened. All of this is going on. The governor then comes out with Jefferson Davis, who attempts to try and mollify people by basically emptying his pocket to try and stop the rioting. The rioting doesn't stop, at which point they level an ultimatum. It's, if you don't stop the rioting, we're going to open fire. And they bring up cannon, all right, and they point the cannons in several sectors of the streets and saying, you've got 5 minutes to disperse or else.
And they did. But the thing is, though, okay, let's talk about the women of the South. Do you know who was more pro-Confederate than anybody? A Southern woman. I mean, seriously. If you were a man and you didn't go to war, they were chastising you.
Well,
so you have these
you had families. Women. You had families chastising each other all the time in these kind of situations. I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that they didn't support the war, because they did. Here's a better picture of the or a larger picture of it. I'm sorry, of some of the different things that you can see.
Well, yeah, no, and I'm just saying though, if the Confederacy's women were rioting, there's a damn problem, because they were more pro-South than almost the men were. You know what I mean?
Well, yes and no. Now, did they support their husbands? Was there people that supported their spouses? Of course. In the South, there was a more martial tradition. That's something that's very true. Culturally,
it was almost Spartan-like. It was almost.
Well, no, it wasn't close to being Spartan-like. But I mean, well, you go a little bit overboard with that. But
hilltops. I mean, that didn't happen.
But they did have. There was more of a martial tradition. All right, in the South, that's very true. Gentlemen were expected to defend their women's honor. To fight for what you believed in was still very much part of their cultural aspects of it. Defending,
right? Dueling was outlawed in the 1700s. They kept doing it to like the 1900s. I mean, come on now.
You have dueling does eventually go. Personally, I think dueling should be allowed. I don't think you necessarily need to do it with pistols, but then again. Personally, I think that's one of the few things that we probably never should have gotten totally rid of.
MC wants to shoot me. You hear that, Jensen? Like, that's what's up.
I wasn't going to shoot you. Ramming you through with a sword wouldn't be a problem, though. But no. These kind of traditions did exist, so from that standpoint, yeah. But to say that the Union women were any less aggressive, especially from an abolitionist standpoint, I think is a misnomer. I think that there was a lot of support from the Union women to support the cause of anti-slavery, and that was always an underlying aspect of the Union's war.
I don't believe it was, but we've had this argument so many times that it's not worth having again.
You can argue all you want that it wasn't, but you can't sit up there and point to the papers and say that it didn't happen. The abolitionist movement was very much on the mind at the beginning of the battles, the beginning of the war.
Maybe to the abolitionist, but not to the soldier.
No, to the look at New York as well.
Look at the riot. Oh, who they killed, dude?
Just because there's race riots, just because that doesn't mean that the Union wasn't able to raise troops to go into and emancipate the slaves.
I don't believe that's what the war was about, and neither did Abraham Lincoln.
No, I hate to tell you that Abraham Lincoln did believe it was that. The thing is that he knew that he couldn't necessarily say it at the very beginning because of what the effect would be. All right, to say that the war was not about slavery, all right, ignores a number of things, and don't try and put words in the mouths of frickin' of Abraham Lincoln, all right, and to what his attitude was. The man had to fight.
I don't have to put words in his mouth. Booth put a bullet in his head. That's good enough.
Oh, really? So you basically shot an innocent man to death who was the only savior of the South that could have prevented Reconstruction. You deserved what you got.
Innocent?
Yes,
300,000 Southern men.
Who opened fire?
Oh, man, I don't have the voice for this fight today. Damn it, MC.
You can disagree with me all you want. You opened fire. You started the Civil War. The result was, and the blood's on your hands.
It's the War of Northern Aggression, by the way.
No, it's a civil war by a bunch of Southern hotheads. All right, and the result was what it was. And you killed the only man who could have mitigated it, the one man who could have helped you guys. All right, during Reconstruction, and you ensured that he died. And you want to celebrate that? You want to come out here and talk about that? How great a thing that was?
We're going to do an episode on Booth. Don't worry about it. We'll get to him.
Yeah, the coward Booth. But we'll get to him at a different time.
Was Brutus a coward?
Huh?
Was Brutus a coward when he killed Caesar?
Yes.
Oh, at least you're consistent. Fair enough.
All right. I mean, think about it.
Saving a republic is better than allowing a dictator.
You didn't save a republic, did you? In fact, you were trying to destroy it.
To create a new one. There's a difference.
Doesn't matter. You're still trying to destroy one. You weren't trying to save it.
But Lincoln was, by creating a federalized system that we still live under today.
No, we live under a federalized system as a result of the actions of the people who shot him in the head.
Guys, we have an opinion from the chat from Shirati. Lincoln is still a traitor. I don't think it's good he got assassinated, but he's still a traitor.
How was Lincoln a traitor, Shirati?
Damn, I got Shirati on my side. I'm doing something wrong.
You notice that? You notice it doesn't worry me that Shirati is supporting you?
Yeah, I fucked up somewhere, Jensen.
Wrong.
So anyway,
shit's getting crazy. She's on my side and she's hanging out with B. Shit's getting crazy.
Run.
So what's wrong? She's just saying I'm wrong.
No, I'm saying run.
Oh, run!
Run away! Run. No, I don't think we talked about Richmond enough. We barely touched on it. So Jefferson Davis goes out there, he makes a speech, and they pretty much give him the middle finger, don't they?
Well, no, I mean, they do disperse. All right, but the thing is for example, during the Battle of Gettysburg, you've mentioned that the shoes, right, that many of the Confederates were attacking there so that they could raid the shoe stores, right? They could raid the shoe factory.
Yeah, that's why Jeb Stuart raided. What city was that he raided? I don't remember. God damn it.
Well, at the same time this is happening, at the same time this is happening, there are tens of thousands of Confederate uniforms sitting in a warehouse in North Carolina.
Yeah, but they can't be connected via rail because the Union.
No, they're connected via rail, but the North Carolinians said only people from North Carolina can wear these uniforms. They wouldn't release the uniforms to the rest of to any of this other Southerners.
That's fucked.
Okay, this is the kind of logistical problem, all right, that Jefferson Davis is having. Unlike the North, and this is something else that's different. One of the big differences was when they declared for a draft in the North, is the North had the ability to enforce the draft. They could be far more effective going in there and saying, okay, well, why haven't you signed up for the draft? Where's your things? They could go through literally and say, okay, this person hasn't registered. In the South, they don't have that ability. They can't enforce the draft in the South. The people don't have the ability to enforce the draft in the South.
Well, mainly because the governors themselves refuse to enforce it.
Well, the people refuse to enforce it. The South refuses to enforce it. I mean, if you're not going to enforce it, though, then you might as well not even have the draft. So the draft isn't nearly as effective in the South as it is in the North. All right. Now, there is an advantage the South has as Union troops come to an area, and this is shown in the movie Shenandoah, for example. When the battles takes place near where they're at, people would on their own pick up their rifles and join in. All right. And this gave the South an advantage to a point, but at the same time, these are not regular troops. They're not well disciplined. They're not, necessarily going to be all that useful in this kind of a battle. All right. And what's more is when the battle takes place, okay, the battle's over, people go home. People left. They didn't stay in the military. They didn't stay under arms.
Well, I mean, some did. I mean, okay, you want to talk about like what about Mosby? I mean, Jesse James, Frank James. They stayed in the militia they were in. But you're right. A lot of times the militia would disperse. That's the point of a militia, right?
No, I mean those are guerrilla raids. They're not really a militia. I would never call Mosby's Raiders a militia. They were not a militia. Now they were an official part of the Confederacy, but they were never a militia.
Why? Where do you draw that difference?
Because they were not trained up by the state. They weren't created by the state. Neither was, and to even say that the kind of guerrilla raiding that was going on that Jesse James was taking part in. Come on, that's ridiculous. They were guerrilla war fighters. They weren't a militia. They weren't a trained militia. They didn't act like a trained militia.
Was Jesse James necessarily a evil man, do you think? I mean, he was a killer.
Was he necessarily an evil man? No, but was he an evil man? Yes.
What do you mean by that?
I'm talking about some of the actions that he took place he took place in. You can't simply compare the actions of Bill Anderson, which Jesse James served under, and compare that to Mosby.
That's true. Mosby was a better man than Anderson, absolutely. But look at Sheridan and Sherman.
Sheridan and Sherman did nothing like that.
I would consider them evil men.
Why?
Scorched earth.
No, they did not use scorched earth. You come back with this attitude that it's scorched earth, and it's nothing of the kind. It's living off the land, yeah, but that's not scorched earth. They did not burn out every single home they came across. They did not shoot every freaking animal that they came across. They didn't go in there and totally destroy these areas that you claim to happen. Did they sit up there and live off the land? Yes. Did they burn anything that could possibly be useful to the South, like the railroad?
Did Atlanta burn?
Atlanta burned? All right. Did the North sit up there, or did the Southern troops sit up there and burn out areas at times like that? Yeah. Why did Atlanta burn? Were people in the houses? Did they surround the houses and hold people in them and burn them alive in the houses? Did they ride up to housing, farmhouses, and shoot every freaking person, man, women, and child? No. You guys over-exaggerate what could have happened. Oh, there was rampant raping and pillaging that was going on. That's bullshit. If you take a look at the actual facts, did a rape happen? Yeah, there were some incidents of rape. Did those guys get hung? Yeah, they actually were tried and hung. To say that they were just a bunch of murdering thieves, like what was going on with Anderson, it's not even close.
But you know what it is close to? What we were talking about off air about the Revolutionary War and what the British did.
No,
it's damn close to that, sir. And you were railing against that, but now you're telling me
it wasn't close to that. They were burning people. There were incidents that happened where they sit up there and locked people in a freaking church
and there was
burned
people down. Well, my friend.
That did not happen by Sheridan, and it did not happen by Sherman. Show me where that happened. Show me where Sherman, where there was an action similar, all right, to the Fort Pillow massacre under Sherman. Show it to me.
You want to go Fort Pillow? Savannah, Georgia.
What happened in Savannah, Georgia?
He fucking laid waste. Have you seen pictures?
No, he did. He did not sit up there and massacre people like what happened at Fort Pillow. He did not march them out, put them in a line, and put a bullet in their heads.
Fort Pillow was a small incident, and they were baiting Forrest. They were begging him to do that.
They were not begging him to do that. What the hell are you talking about?
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Where was Fort Pillow? Where was it?
Fort Pillow's in Tennessee / if I'm not mistaken, Fort Pillow's Tennessee / Missouri, right?
Yeah. And what brigade did the Union send in there?
It doesn't matter. They were just
you know what I'm talking about. You know damn well what they were doing.
So because it was a black brigade that was defending it at the time, that justifies what happened, right?
Does that justify it? No. But does that enrage?
Hold on, we're not done yet. We're not done yet. And you're going to compare that to what Sherman did? To Savannah?
Yeah, I am.
How so? How is it that taking black soldiers under arms, under uniform, and putting a bullet in their head?
How does a fort with 1,000 people compare to Atlanta, Georgia?
What do you mean compared to Atlanta? How many people were in Atlanta at the time?
City in the South? Are you kidding me?
How many people were in Atlanta, Georgia when it quote unquote burned?
Well, yeah, they ran. You would run too.
Well, it had nothing to do with it ran. They were already not there anymore. Okay, they were, before they even marched in, when they finally surrounded and took Atlanta, there were less than 5,000 people in Atlanta.
Yeah, do you still want your house burnt down? I don't care if you're home or not. You
don't want your house burnt down? I guess you should have stayed, huh?
Why? So you can die in the house as Sherman burns it?
No, Sherman didn't burn the houses like that.
No. You want to act like they didn't rape and pillage. Don't fuck with me.
They didn't rape and pillage, and you have no way of even looking at that. No, they didn't. You act like all of this was going on, and it was this mass freaking thing that was taking place. When people actually looked at the evidence of what was going on, and they actually looked at real records, what they find is no, it wasn't nearly as bad as everyone claims it is. You guys, this is all part of the wonderful myth, the lost cause, and how evil those Yankees are, and how evil Sherman is. Sherman could have been a hell of a lot worse than what you guys even claim that it was.
Sherman was bipolar and insane, and you fucking know it.
Once again, you're gonna sit there and compare Sherman. I'll take Sherman anytime over frickin' Forrest.
Well, Forrest gets bad in Reconstruction. We'll get to
Forrest that. Was bad before Fort Pillow was because of Forrest.
No, there's no. Show me proof that Forrest ordered that. There's no proof.
Didn't say he ordered it. He sure as hell wasn't able to stop it, though, was he? And he was in command.
Did he order it?
He doesn't have to. He didn't
stop it. For the people watching, Fort Pillow was a massacre. I'm not arguing that. That was wrong. But Forrest, he's not the cause of Fort Pillow. He's not.
No, he is the cause. He's the one responsible. He did not have his troops under his command.
Okay, the Sheridan is responsible for burning down the breadbasket of the Confederacy single-handedly.
He first of all, it wasn't the breadbasket of the Confederacy. The Shenandoah Valley was not the breadbasket, the corn belt of the freaking Confederacy was Georgia. All right. But if you're going to sit up there and you want to talk about that, and you stop the foodstuffs of the Confederacy, and next.
Yeah, you starved us out, dude. You didn't beat us. You starved us out.
Start beating people and starving people there's literally no different. And it's not like the South didn't sit up there and starve people when they got the chance to do it either. So don't come back and whine and cry about the tactics that were normal.
Did that happen? And I just didn't read about it.
No. But you obviously didn't read about what was happening at Chattanooga. You obviously didn't read about what the kind of tactics were. These are normal tactics. The fact that it worked, oh well. This was normal. This is the way wars were fought. You act like somehow that they wouldn't do something like this.
Normal doesn't make it right. All right? People nowadays
are saying normal means this is what do you mean it doesn't? How does it make it wrong? Because your side was on the receiving end of it? That's the only reason you think that this was wrong.
That's a fair point. I'll tack one up on him. See, he got me there. That's a fair point.
Gentlemen, Terran Marine has put, have you all read After Lincoln, How Union Won the War and Lost the Peace? Good book.
I actually not read that. Then again, I wouldn't say that Lincoln did lose the peace because he was dead.
Well, it's his own fault.
No, that man's assassinated with a bullet behind the head, in the back of the head, because he couldn't shoot him in the front, and it's his own fault.
Shouldn't have been in that balcony seat. Stay home, brother.
Yeah, okay.
No, but hey, Terran Marine, dude, can you hit me up on Twitter with the name of that book again? I might check it out on Amazon. I love history books, so.
Okay, well, I think we've argued the what was going on with the food riots and the riots and everything that were taking place. I don't really have anything else unless you want to talk about something else more specifically.
Well, I mean, we threw Fort Pillow back and forth. Should we just attack Fort Pillow? Is that what we want to do?
Do you want to carry that on to? We're going to talk more about Fort Pillow because there's a situation we're going to have to start talking about with the fall of Chattanooga. All right, and the relief of Chattanooga, and that's really going to be the next. To be honest, it'll probably be the next thing we're talking about. Did we already talk about Chickamauga?
Yes, we did.
We covered Chickamauga. So we now need to talk about the next big thing that's happened. That happens is the relief of Chattanooga and the Battle of Chattanooga, where Bragg is decisively defeated, and then what the ramifications behind that.
Well, no, and people are going to be surprised. There won't be any arguments there. I fucking hate Bragg. I think he was a shit general, and I'm going to be agreeing with MC the whole goddamn show. It'll be boring.
But I think that's I mean, we've been going at this for an hour. We've been trying to keep this down to an hour or so.
All right, absolutely. And Jensen, once again, thank you for hosting. That way my audio works. I don't know what's going on, guys. I'm in the market for a new PC. Optimus has the specs for me. I'm just waiting on my money. Tax return, baby. I'm getting a new computer. We'll be running OBS or some shit. It'll be great.
Excuse me.
All right, so we'll be back tomorrow from the news show.
So just so you know, Terran Marine says he doesn't do Twitter. Okay.
Oh shit. All right. I'll try to remember the name of that book.
So I got it for you.
Oh, thank you, Jensen.
Jensen will put it in Discord for you.
Yeah, there you go. And hey, Jensen, you want to throw the Discord link out? We have some new viewers now, thanks to Creepy Little Book last night. Throw the Discord link out there.
All right, we'll do. Just a sec.
And MC, are you going to be ranting tomorrow morning?
As long as my voice holds out, yeah. I've got a lot of things queued up already for it.
Nice. Everybody's getting sick, dude. What's with this man flu? And how's it spreading through the internet? I don't get it.
It does seem to be that way. I mean, for crying out loud, Styx had it even. So, I mean, it's like everybody's coming down with it for a little bit.
Yeah, like, oh, Styx has it? I didn't know that. So yeah, that's Styx, me, you, Cabby had it, freaking Optimus. Jensen, watch out, dude. You're going to get infected.
B will keep him healthy with chicken soup.
Yeah. I posted the link
with their shoe, like right across the head.
Yep. I've posted the link in there, so if anyone wants to join, they're welcome.
Yeah, join the Discord, guys. We hang out there all the damn time. Thank you very much. This has been MC and Mad Talk Civil War. I apologize about my voice for the third time. It's shit, but you know, the show must go on, right, my friends? We must keep it going.
Oh, yeah.
We're out of here. Peace.